Ecosystems that are dominated by non-native species can look a lot different than ecosystems comprised of mostly or all native species. These systems are often called novel ecosystems. In this video, we will look at what novel ecosystems are, some examples of them, and what their potential to contribute to conservation is. Humans have transformed the planet to such an extent that a whole new class of ecosystems have been created, what we call novel ecosystems. A novel ecosystem is one that has been heavily influenced by humans, but is not currently under direct human management. And there are no natural ecosystems that have the same composition and/or ecosystem functions as novel ecosystems. In other words, these are ecosystems with no natural analog. They only exist because of human influence. Although nobody knows exactly how much of the Earth is covered by these novel systems, researchers at the University of Maryland have estimated that about 35% of the planet is comprised of novel ecosystems. And as human influence on the planet continues, it's likely that this figure will only increase in the future. Novel ecosystems are often dominated by non-native species. For example, in our reading by Emma Maris, she recalls being in a novel ecosystem, a forest in Hawaii that featured trees that were native to India, Central America, and Australia. While originally these species would have been brought to Hawaii by people, the individuals that Maris was seeing likely weren't planted by people. Instead, they established populations on their own, creating new novel ecosystems in the process. Another example of a novel ecosystem is cities. Cities and their role in conservation will be our main focus next week, but as they are a novel ecosystem and generally full of non-native species, it's worth touching on them now. While humans do manage a lot of the ecosystems in cities, like recreational parks or botanical gardens, many other systems are left more to their own devices. But because they are within urban areas, there is inevitably a human influence throughout them, including the presence of non-native species. So even those ecosystems that appear to be the most natural, like patches of remnant forest or ravines, can be considered novel ecosystems. There are also some systems in cities that are more obviously novel ecosystems. For example, vacant lots are by definition abandoned spaces in cities, but this doesn't mean that they are empty. Some studies have suggested that vacant lots can actually be some of the most biodiverse parts of the urban ecosystem, supporting a wide range of plants, insects, arthropods, and small mammals. They can also serve as stepping stones of habitat in between larger green spaces. However, vacant lots are not often viewed as a positive from a social perspective, as they are an indicator of a struggling neighborhood. And while they may have a lot of plant life on them, they're often dominated by weeds and other early colonizing plants that aren't viewed as an attractive addition to a neighborhood. One initiative that is working to enhance the social benefits of vacant lots while not losing or even managing to increase the environmental benefits is the Vacant to Vibrant project in the United States. We'll hear more about this initiative next week. A growing number of ecologists believe that novel ecosystems are worthy of study and even protection. But old habits die hard when it comes to conservation, and there's a lot of resistance to the idea. A lot of this resistance comes from the fact that novel ecosystems are often dominated by non-native species, and because conservation generally works under the assumption that native ecosystems are best and that non-native species are bad. The mindset is, as Perto Logo in our reading by Emma Maris put it, quote, that diversity doesn't count because they are the wrong species, unquote. This attitude makes sense when we consider the philosophical underpinnings of conservation, which, as we have discussed before, often views nature as something precious and untouched that needs to be protected. But it can be a difficult perspective to reckon with if we consider nature to be more dynamic, and that human influence on a system is not necessarily a bad thing that forever takes the value away from an ecosystem. Novel ecosystems can provide the same, if not more, ecosystem services than their more natural counterparts, which is getting a lot of conservationists to abandon their mistrust of novel ecosystems and on board with their protection. However, others remain committed to getting rid of any and all non-native species and restoring ecosystems back to their so-called unaltered conditions. Other folks are in the middle, proceeding with caution, noting that the tolerance of novel ecosystems is not necessarily a bad thing, but that because they can still pose a risk to native ecosystems, they can't be outright accepted. In the end, the value of novel ecosystems comes down to the question of what we want to value in conservation. Whether ecosystem processes, ecosystem services, or unique biodiversity should be of paramount importance. And like almost every other issue in conservation, there is no right or wrong answer, and it may be decided on a case-by-case basis.